Welcome to the very first episode of Breathe, Hope, Vote with Emily Mayer. Breathe, Hope, Vote is an all new podcast with The Arena where we dive into the elections and legislative happenings around South Carolina. A little about me. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, a former candidate. I'm the senior manager at the Ford and Ford Group, and most recently, I'm a brand new contributor to The Arena. The Arena is South Carolina's only progressive media company, publishing commentary, interviews, and podcasts about everything going on in the Palmetto State. Check us out on Substack and make sure to subscribe and consider a paid subscription to get access to more content and support our work as progressive voices in South Carolina. What better way to kick off this podcast than to have my first guest be somebody who knows me better than just about anybody else on this planet? People who have worked with me have often heard me allude to this man before. Things would not be possible in the Mayer household without him. My first guest is my lovely husband, Phil. Hey, babe.
Hey, babe.
Tell the people a little bit about you.
About me?
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in Edison, New Jersey. Um, I am an avid golfer. I work for FanDuel Sportsbook. Um, I love my three girls more than anything in the world, and happy to be your first guest on your new endeavor here. So
No pressure. It's going to be great.
I'm scared out of my you know what. So
No, we're just going to make this seem like a normal kitchen table conversation. People are going to think we do this all the time. It's going to be fantastic.
sure, let's convince them.
All right. So everyone who I meet along the way wants to know how we ended up in South Carolina. Why did we pick Bluffton? How did this world that we have now come to know it come to be? You want to give the Reader's Digest version of the story for our first time listeners?
Sure, it's one word.
And that magic word is?
It's not actually just one word, but COVID did bring us down to South Carolina. Um, my parents and I frequented Hilton Head Island ever since I was about a year old. My parents have always seen it as their spot to retire. And about 8 years ago or so, they bought a condo in Palmetto Dunes, which during COVID would have probably been vacant the entire time. And
Because your dad's a doctor and he was super busy.
because my dad is a doctor, correct, and he was dealing with a lot of stuff in his office, as you can imagine. And so I was told I was working from home indefinitely. I was working for the New York Jets at the time. You were told that you were going to be teaching from home indefinitely. What a world. And we decided to ask my parents, can we go down for just a week and spend some time down there so our dog, because it was just you and me and the dog who needs exercise, needs to be outside, and there was ice all over the ground in New Jersey. We decided, like, let's go down for a week. So a random Sunday in March of 2020, we packed a week's worth of stuff in our car on a Sunday night, drove here to Maryland.
Yeah, visiting my parents right now. Yeah, drove here just as a stopping point.
Yep. Stopped over, continued the drive on that Monday morning. Finally got down there, and we stayed for a week. And after a week, we were like, we can probably stay here a little bit longer. Let's see if we can turn this into 2 weeks.
Had to order a ton of clothes because we only brought.
We did.
Oh.
We white t-shirts and bathing suits and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But we were there for 2 weeks, then 4 weeks, then before we knew it, we were contemplating canceling our wedding at the last minute because we were supposed to get married in September of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think, May of 2020, we had a big check due to our venue, and we were like, what are we doing here? Let's not have this gigantic wedding that we were planning and figure out a way to move down into a place where we seemingly love to live for 2 months and saw ourselves raising a family there someday. Place where we can be outside 11, 12 months out of the year and enjoy nice weather and go for walks and play golf, 11 or 12 months out of the year, not a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely couldn't do that in New Jersey for
correct.
sure.
But yeah, then ultimately we got married on the beach in Palmetto Dunes in July of 2020, so 2 months earlier.
With 8 guests and our photographer.
8 guests, our photographer. We flew our flowers down that we were supposed to use up in New Jersey. And our photographer, who also loved the Hilton Head area, was like, I'll make a trip out of this, and came down and took some
Yeah, he's the
amazing
best. Shout
photos.
out to Tommy,
Yep,
Forever North Photography.
he
Give him
was
a plug.
incredible. But yeah, it allowed us to keep our lives on the path that we wanted to, right? Like we knew we wanted to start a family pretty soon after we got married, and we could have pushed our wedding back and then back again and then back again, and who knows when Charlotte and Ellie, or if Charlotte and Ellie would
Yeah,
have ever been a part of our
I
lives.
know. I know. It's really, really wild to think about. And I think, something that I have heard along the way that I'm sure either you've heard me gripe about or people have said it to you and you've heard it is that, like, well, but you're not from here. Like, that's a negative thing, right? And when I ran my town council race, it was used against me, right, as a huge negative as to why I wasn't the right person to represent Bluffton, why I'm not the right person to be at the state house advocating, right? It's like the excuse that keeps coming up is that I'm not from here, but we were super intentional about making Bluffton and South Carolina our home, right? We knew where we were moving to was different than where we had grown up and where we had lived previously. We weren't, that wasn't lost on us. We weren't naive to that fact. So when people say that to me, I really don't necessarily know how to react because, like, yeah, you're right. I'm not from here, but like, I want to get a better perspective of how other people in other communities in our great nation and in our state live. I'm not quite sure why that's such a bad thing. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit as to, like, our intention in moving there and the benefit that that perspective can bring in the work that I do and that you have now become a part of behind the scenes?
Sure, I'll, I'll do my best to articulate it. So my take is everyone isn't from like where they ever came from. You know what I mean? Like at some point they had to whether it was like our settlers, right, or immigrants had to like find the land. So like we were lucky enough to discover Bluffton, South Carolina while we were living here for or living in Hilton Head for a little over a year and realize like this is a great place. And this is a place where like we want to be a part of it. And like you said, it's not a bad thing that we come from somewhere else and have potentially different perspectives.
A
Like
lot of people in Bluffton is not the place that it used to be. So Bluffton specifically, outside of South Carolina as a whole, we are not unique in that perspective.
for sure. And again, like I think we liked that it was very diverse and there were a ton of people from all over the place and we can meet. Like I've met so many friends from Ohio, Minnesota, all over the country that like they decided that Bluffton was for them as well. And maybe it's for different reasons, maybe it's for the same reasons, who knows? But at the end of the day, it's a great community. And I think that's also why you decided to run for town council because we wanted to dig our roots pretty deeply here if we could. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that, even though you lost your race.
Yeah,
But like we've met a ton of really great people, great friends. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't change any decision that we made. And even we have family members who are looking to come down from New Jersey because they see how much we love it. And that's the thing, right? Like we saw how great and how happy so many people were living in Bluffton, South Carolina, that we were attracted to it.
yeah,
So that's happening all over the country,
yeah.
especially with the new work from home culture. I work fully remote. So again, the ability to pick up and root yourself somewhere else if you're not happy with where you live. We love where we live now and
Right.
we're proud of it.
Right.
So
And it was
it's
such a privilege to be able to just uproot our lives and be able to do that, right? It's something we always talked about doing, but we both loved our jobs and we weren't ever sure how that was going to happen. And this COVID door opened and made that a reality. And we don't ever intend on leaving. People ask us that all the time, whether it's people in Bluffton or people back in New Jersey or people who have just known us our whole lives. Like, is this where you foresee yourself? I don't foresee us ever leaving. I love our home, our neighborhood, the people we've met, the communities we've built around us. But you know, maybe maybe the people who have lived there their whole lives and they haven't had that experience of going somewhere else and experiencing how other places can be and how you can grow by going into other communities and gaining that perspective, you
For
know.
sure. And that's also why I thought, I admire the fact that you decided to run for a town council position. Like, man, you've only lived there for a little over 2 years. Like, there's not many people who would buck up the courage to do something like that.
It's
Or,
hard to get people to run for office in general.
right, yeah. And you took the bull by the horns and you knew that I was there every step of the way supporting you
Mm-hmm.
and taking care of the girls when you had to go on the campaign trail.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but
Especially not having, you know, family permanently around us, right? That was a big undertaking on your part, and you being a cheerleader and being able to kind of ground us at home was the only way for us to really survive that sprint of a special election. So
yeah,
thanks for that. But you know, when it comes to you cheering me on and supporting me in whatever I decide to do. You touched on it a little bit before. I was teaching, right? Another huge change that came into our lives. I spent 6 years teaching, 4 of them in New Jersey before we moved. And then you kind of made the suggestion to me after seeing, I think, some displeasure and stress and just a mental health decline, say like, have you given thought to like picking something else? So
did
share
I? Was I that nice about it?
share a little bit about where that push came from and kind of that journey that we went on to that transition for me.
Oh, I definitely wasn't that nice about it. I pretty much told you like you weren't going to teach anymore, and not in an aggressive way that
Not
like
in a controlling
correct.
way.
It was more so I knew that you didn't want to teach anymore and you just needed somebody to kind of confirm your thoughts and your feelings.
Yeah.
And so, you taught what, 2 years in Bluffton, and the first year I think was okay. You were teaching a non-special ed classroom, which
Yeah,
was very
the only year
right,
that I
which was
taught that I
very
did that.
different for you. But
Yeah.
I actually think you might have enjoyed that a little bit more than your second year.
It was
But
just very different.
it was very different for sure. But your second year, I think like you were used to the way that schools operated in New Jersey, especially from a special education perspective. And I think you realize like how different and potentially how far behind the South Carolina public schools were compared to your teaching in New Jersey in terms of your workload as a special education teacher, what you were responsible for. And a lot of that was because there just weren't enough teachers and there
Right.
wasn't enough support.
Right.
So what's cool about I don't even know if it's cool, but what you came to the realization of was like I'm just not happy. I'm not, I'm working way too hard. You're not getting the recognition that you do or the support from your administration or anything like that. And you looked at me and you were just like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I was like, good, because let's get you out of that classroom. And then the final straw was
Yeah.
there was like, I think multiple bomb threats
Yeah,
or
there
gun
was a shooting
threats.
threat. I was like what, like 35 weeks pregnant at the
35
point.
weeks pregnant with Charlotte,
Yeah, our
with our
firstborn.
firstborn. And I was like, why should you fear going into a classroom when you're 35 weeks pregnant?
Ever, but
Ever,
yes.
ever, but yes, 35 weeks pregnant. And then me, like, I should never have this fear in my heart that my wife is going to work. She's going to work with children. She's going to a school. And yet, like, I'm scared that something could happen to you. And at that point, could happen to you or could happen to our 35-week-old unborn child.
Right.
So it was just terrifying.
Yeah.
And that was like the last bit for me
I
to
was
be
going to
like,
say that was when I
I
could tell.
raise my hand, teacher.
Yeah,
You're not teaching
that's
anymore.
when I could tell that the tide sort of turned for you. And yeah, I mean, when we chose to move from New Jersey, right, I knew it was going to be different. I also knew that teaching in a mid COVID, post COVID world was going to be different. And I loved my job in New Jersey. And I think I was afraid that going back to teaching the place that I loved post COVID would leave a bad taste in my mouth. So that was like part of a push to leave New Jersey. But then I also think that I knew I was stepping into something different, and I just don't think I expected what that toll was going to take on me, especially being a new mom. I was going to school and really burning myself from both ends, and then coming home and having to be a brand new mom and like not being able to be. You never said this, but internally, I felt like I wasn't doing good at either of those things, right? I wasn't being the best teacher that I knew I could be because I've had that experience before, or felt like I've had that experience before. And I wasn't meeting whatever criteria or threshold I was setting for myself as a new mom. So that was like, for me, going back and having that experience kind of the final straw. And ultimately, teaching in South Carolina was where I started my advocacy work. But I could tell that my voice as a teacher was only going to get me so far, and that I could be louder and more disruptive in a more beneficial way outside of the classroom. Like ultimately, one could argue I can make a bigger impact for the students that I was teaching doing what I do now in advocacy than I could have as their teacher because my hands were tied on so many other things.
Well, you already got how many kids free meals?
Yeah, we worked really hard on that one. Yeah,
I mean, that's probably a bigger impact there than you. I mean, not directly for all of your kids, but just more kids across the state of South Carolina. So,
that's a good point. It's a great point.
but also
Yeah,
just, for your sanity,
yeah.
you were still a great
Thank
teacher and
you.
you were a great mother.
Get yourself a life partner who tells you those things. That's that. Um,
Not lying.
I I know. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm being very truthful. I promise.
So this is so funny to have you on and like listening to you say the things that you're saying and like look back, because I would call you previously a person who considered themselves pretty apolitical. Is that fair? Right? I gave you crap because in 2016 you didn't go vote, even though you weren't the only person who didn't go vote. Slowly we're going to chip a
Breathe, hope.
vote. Right. Right.
Okay.
That's the last piece of the puzzle. We're breathing, we're hoping, and we're voting. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the tides that have turned there from being somebody who considered themselves pretty apolitical, not really engaged in the process, to having a wife who ran for town council special election where like 2,000 people show up to vote. Like, where has the perspective changed? What knowledge have you gained? I would say my biggest win of all time is getting you to be a primary voter, not just a general election voter, is like helping you understand the importance of that. But I want to hear kind of from you where that tide turned and kind of where your perspective has shifted in regards to that process. Because there's lots of people who stay home. There's lots of people who say they're apolitical. There are lots of people who say my vote doesn't matter. I know how my vote is going to be. Those are all things that I've heard, not just from you, from plenty of other people that were close within our lives. And my hope is that by doing this work with the arena, if we're not changing hearts and minds, we're helping other people change people's hearts and minds. So like, help me help them. Give us that perspective.
How much honesty do you want here?
Go, all of it. You could say it. You can say
Um,
it's only because of me that you got involved. If that's the truth, I'm not. That's fine.
well, I don't really have much of a choice in our household because of how involved you are. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Like, again, I've been educated in the space because of how involved you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that it's a good thing to exercise my right to
You
vote.
grew up in a household where people voted.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Whether it's a primary or presidential elections that I don't even know are happening or elections that are nationally broadcasted. Um, where did it change or why did it change? I think part of the reason is because we moved to a place where my vote definitely mattered more. I think like I was more apolitical in New Jersey where, and especially my town, where a lot of people thought and like felt the same way that I did about a lot of issues. And I think like that's part of the issue sometimes is
Mm-hmm.
that like people consider their vote to be insignificant if there's like a lot of people who are voting the same way that they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're in a really good position, whether it's with this podcast or the work that you do, or just how involved you are in the political scene, to encourage people like, hey, you are actually in a state where your vote matters in every election, on every issue. When you go to the state house, you have to try to convince people to not vote certain ways because, like, hey, your vote actually matters,
Yeah.
or to vote in a specific direction. But yeah, it's a mix of that. I mean, I candidly still consider myself pretty apolitical, but I support you, and I think we are pretty aligned in our ideologies and the things that we believe are, really impactful and important issues to be
Right.
fighting
Well,
for.
I think that's like the piece that maybe has become clearer to you is how many facets of your life are impacted by some of these elections or the policies that go into place by some of these people. Maybe things that you didn't think about before that now,
Sure.
I mean,
And
now you're a
I
dad,
was gonna
right?
say, just being a father is definitely a reason to care more and be more involved.
Yeah.
And yeah, you never know, like, what our girls are gonna be like 14, 15 years from now.
Yeah.
And like the work that you're doing could directly impact your children or friends of your children down the road or just people today. But like, yeah, I think like pretty selfishly, as a father, you need to care more. And it's again more for the two of them than it is for myself. And I'm sure like you are way more selfless than probably I am, in your stances and your ability to like care for people that you don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas like I care more about the political scene for our family and for our daughters first and foremost, and then everyone else. But you have like this
Yeah.
crazy
I'm a
ability
little
to care
unique.
about literally everyone anywhere,
Yeah, but I
and
think
that's
like,
what I admire about
well,
you for
thank you.
sure.
But I think like what you're describing is what the typical citizen voter, potential voter is, right? Like they want to see the direct impact that the policy is going to have on their lives, right? Right now, people are talking about their cost of groceries, right? Their cost of living, their gas prices. These are things that are directly impacting them that they may or may not realize are directly impacted by the people that they're voting for and not even necessarily all the way up the ticket, right? When we
Hmm.
talk about cost of living, that goes all the way down the ballot to your local elections. So I think, yeah, I think it's just like being persistent. If you're somebody who, like me, who's an avid voter and avidly involved in the process, being persistent, educating people, not putting people down for what they don't understand, right? Truly like that education piece of it. And I think that's where the benefit of me being a teacher kind of comes into play in what I do on a daily basis. But I think it's important for people to hear because I don't think that I know you're not alone in the thought process and the staying home. I want to remind everybody listening there was a primary election determined on the 11th that came down to 33 votes. So when I hear people say that their vote doesn't matter, I always point to races like that, right? If 33 more people who had said, oh, my vote doesn't matter, this is a foregone conclusion, or I don't really care what's going on at the state house, it really doesn't impact me, if 33 more people had said, well, maybe my vote's going to be the one that makes a difference, right? We don't know what would have happened. We don't know, can't predict the things that didn't come through. But yeah, reminder on that segue of a note, there's a runoff election taking place right now, happening on the 25th. We don't live in an area where there's a runoff election, but early voting, today is Friday, it's the last day of early voting for that. Early voting for that runoff election, and runoffs are on Tuesday. So if you live in one of the areas in our state that has a runoff election, there are 13, 12 of them at the state house, one of them for Congress. Make sure that you're going out to vote. I wrote a piece for the Arena about all you need to know about those primary races. So check it out, inform yourself, educate other people in your circles. Uh, Runoff on Tuesday. All right. The last piece that I have for you is kind of give me an understanding of what it's like. You're normally the man behind the curtain when I do my work, right? you're able to hang out with our kids when I go to Colombia, except for on the rare occasions that we both have to travel. So that's really interesting. We can talk about that a little bit. Um, you're the man holding down the fort while I'm going to school board meetings or going to teach people how to advocate or heading to the state house or I don't know what else I do, but yes. So talk to me a little bit about like what that's like when you get to go with me to events and you get to meet the people that I always am talking about, or you get to like piece some of the puzzle pieces together. We went to the AFA Gala with me where you got to meet a lot of our friends and advocates. Talk to me a little bit about what it's like to like be in the background and like see all the pieces kind of moving that I do because I do a lot. So thank you for letting me do a lot because I know it's not easy.
Um, no, it is easy because I know that, again, the work that you're doing is super impactful and you're very passionate about it. And for me to stay home with our two beautiful daughters and our dog so you can go do really impactful work is actually really easy. Um, uh, but when we do have the opportunity to be together and I get to see you like at the gala, that was so cool to meet so many people that you have impacted so positively directly. Remind me of the family that you work with,
The bells.
the Bells.
Yes.
So, like, for Mrs. Bell, what's Mrs.
Rebecca.
Rebecca
Yep.
to come
David and
up,
Rebecca Bell.
right? Well, it was actually David. It wasn't even Rebecca. I'm sure Rebecca said really nice things about you too, but it was David who came up to me and was like, "I just love your wife. Like, she is amazing."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "You're telling me things I already know?" But
It's cool to hear them from other
it's
people.
really cool to hear them from and straight from their mouths, the people who you always tell me about. When you go and I am home with the girls and the dog, and you come back and you tell me stories about, you know, whenever the Bells are at the State House, like there's never a dry eye,
Oh, never.
and
I'll have to have them on. We'll have to do that whole thing. Yeah.
yeah, you should. Um, but yeah, it's great to hear the stories, but when I get to witness firsthand how much people appreciate the work that you're doing, I mean, I tear up because I'm so proud of you and the work that you do. And again, it's like as a father, I'm proud of my children's mother, who is my wife, who I chose to be with for the rest of my life, who's doing a lot of very selfless work and impactful work that a very small percentage of people in this world could even have the energy to do. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild. I think about like the few times that you've had to travel for work and I've had to travel for work and balancing that and being a parent and knowing just how important the work is that I do and not that being a mom is the greatest thing on the face of the earth, my personal experience. But like being able to kind of balance those two because the work that I do does directly impact them and like knowing that you know, yes, I have to drive 2 hours to Columbia and be there for maybe 3 days this week, but like I'm doing it for them. I'm doing it for other people's kids. I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it for everybody. But like the first time that happened, it was just Charlotte, and I was pregnant with Ellie, and I packed up our car and I booked a hotel suite, and I found a friend in Columbia who was like, "Hey, I'll hang out with your kid because you have a really big hearing going on at the state house this week." And it's like the definition, the work that I do is like the definition of it taking a village and being able to be at the AFA Gala with people who I'm usually in really awful situations with, where the mood and the vibe is usually as low as it can be, to have been able to be there that night and have just like endless genuine joy and celebration and togetherness and have you see the bright side of the work that I do, I think was really important to me because I feel like you often hear about the lows of the work that I do. So when the highs come, I'm glad that we got to experience that together for sure. And again, this session, you had to travel and I had to be at the State House. And now we had 2 kids. And, again, takes a village. Called up a good friend. She got me her best friend's daughter to come hang out at our house with our kids. So you could do your work and I could do my work. And there we were at the State House fighting for people's kids, and other people were pitching in to help take care of our families. So, you know, the family that we've made in South Carolina is really special. And I'm excited to have your family actually officially join us in South Carolina to kind of get to see more of that and merge those 2 pieces of our lives together.
A
But
year and a half,
yeah, they'll be here before we know it for sure.
and then maybe 2 others
Yeah.
sooner.
Listen, they're going to tell me that I'm shipping all my people down. I can already hear the Twitter trolls going on about like me infiltrating South Carolina. They're just hysterical about the work that we do. But that's how I know that I'm doing the right thing. If you didn't have haters, you're not doing something right. Somebody said once upon a time, maybe. But that's what I tell my that's what I tell myself at least. So okay. I didn't have this question written down, but it just popped into my head thinking about that.
Mm.
Is there any time that you're ever worried or nervous about the work that I do?
Not as worried and nervous as I felt the last time you went into a classroom.
Oh God. Well, that's something to unpack there, that we feel safer doing advocacy work at the State House in South Carolina than we do as a public school teacher. That's wild.
I haven't felt that way. I think there are reasons why I should feel that way. Um,
You asked me when I was on my campaign if I was ever a little uneasy, so I
yeah,
feel like now I'm going to turn that question around on you.
yeah. I mean, don't put thoughts in my head, but
No,
yeah,
I
no,
was talking about my Twitter trolls. That's what dawned on me.
yeah, no, I haven't felt that way yet.
Yeah, that's
But
good.
again, there's probably reasons
That you
to feel
that
that
you could
way,
feel that
right?
way.
But I don't want to, because I don't want to feel the way that I felt about having to tell you how I felt
Yeah, but at least that was
about being in the classroom.
at least now that's an assumed risk of the work that I do, right?
Sure,
It's like understood in the advocacy realm when you're advocating for progressive values and causes in a state like South
for sure.
Carolina, right?
Versus being in a classroom with children and other
The
teachers
fact that
and
that
shouldn't
is
feel that way.
becoming our norm, like the fact that that should be an assumed risk for a teacher is not a norm that I ever want to accept as a society. So, yeah, I stand by that 100%.
Fair.
All right, any closing thoughts? Any parting words of wisdom? Anything you want to get off your
From the
chest?
wise man.
That's funny. My maiden name was Wiseman, for those of you who didn't know that. So I used to get wise man jokes a lot. Go ahead.
No, just again, happy that I got to be your first guest.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
I feel like,
I feel like we did pretty
well,
okay too.
yes, and I knew you would be great, but also I feel like
Great, really?
yeah, you were
All
fantastic.
right. All
I feel like it's a really good way for people to get to know me who maybe haven't spent any
right.
time
Same
getting
about you
to
about
know
your
me
guests,
yet.
okay?
But also, yeah, the people who do already know me, who have heard me talk so much about you, but haven't had the chance to meet you, or you haven't crossed paths with them yet. Now I feel like they're going to be like, oh, Phil Bayer, that's my guy. You talk so much about him, and I heard him on your podcast. So I love that
That's gonna happen.
I love that for you, and I love that for all of the people who are going to feel that way. I can already think of one or two off the top of my head.
Sweet.
But I'll have to have the other Phil come on and be a guest. So not only
Oh, please don't,
why
because
he's
he'll
going to
be
be
the
so
better,
good.
yeah, he'll be the
Yeah.
better Phil, and I don't know if I can do. I'm too competitive, you know that.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, not only is my husband Phil, my boss and dear, dear friend is also named Phil. Call them my 2 Phils. It becomes a whole thing. Sometimes people out of context aren't understanding which one I'm referring to. So I'll have to have
And he is the better Phil, so
well, you're both really great in very different ways. And I love both of you uniquely because of that.
that's
So,
so sweet of you. I know who you love more. So.
so we'll have to have the other Phil on as a guest, and then people can side by side the 2 Phils.
Yeah.
But you are ultra competitive. It's the golfer in you. So well,
Athlete.
it's the athlete.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I wasn't just a golfer. No.
Okay, all right.
Um.
Let's put a bow on this one.
All right. So
You want to close us out? You
Yeah,
want to say
yeah.
things?
Well, I'm just saying, like, I'm happy that I got to be your first guest, and you'll have many more exciting, probably more exciting than me guests, on your podcast. But this is like a cool way for you to get your name, your voice, your work out there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, thanks for having me on, babe. This is
Thanks for
awesome.
signing on to doing this whole life adventure with me, babe. Appreciate it.
Anytime, I'd do it over 100 times if I could. So
Well, thank you. All right, everybody. That was Phil Mayer. I'm Emily Mayer. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Breathe, Hope, Vote podcast through the Arena SC. We will catch you next time. Make sure to subscribe to get updated on all of our content. Have a good one.